Welcome to Landria Onkka on YouTube, here to help you break through those fears and live an awesome life. All right, so we're going to talk about signs, and I'm going to share some angel stories, some signs from the other side, just some stuff that goes on from the unknown that we don't always understand, but we sometimes dismiss. But I'm going to tell you some stories that cannot be dismissed. So I was inspired by the subscriber who told me this amazing story about her dog. They loved her dog. Her and her, I think it was your sister. I hope I got that right. Had the dog some hair from the dog in a locket, which is so sweet. And they didn't wear it very often because they were afraid they would lose it. So they'd only wear it for good luck and whatever. They're very closest dogs. Well, first of all, your soul groups include animals and plants and everything else, because it's just energies. So let's say, your mom in a last, 100 years ago lifetime is, now an animal, showed up as a cat on your door. I'm sure, who knows what my baby coo kitty, I don't know what that was about, but I'm sure I have a soul connection to him. Don't discount that. But so you said in the story, well, I know this is silly. No, it's not silly. So you had this super close energetic connection, a soul connection of some kind. So I guess her sister was wearing the locket. It was open. The hair was gone. And then you guys were so distraught, of course, because, you just lost your baby. And, it's like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? I know how that feels. And so it sounds silly, but it's not silly. That was the one little piece you had of your baby, right? So you asked for a sign, you figured it was out there somewhere. You asked for a sign, you figure it's gone. And then you look down at your feet, and here is the lock of hair from your baby, your puppy. Okay, no, not a coincidence. Not like, oh, we missed it the first time. Have you ever ripped a place apart and then it's sitting there right in the middle of the floor? You guys have talked about the cell phones. I had that happen with a cell phone. Ripped my car apart. Ripped it apart. I mean everywhere. And then like a couple weeks later, it is sitting in the middle of the floor. I know for a fact I went everywhere. It's not a big car, it's a two-seater. All right, so I'm going to tell you some angelic stories, because our loved ones in particular are always with us. They don't go away, and the last thing they want to see you do is grieving, because they're happy. Now, I'll give you a very short story about my friend, who, if she's watching this, will know who she is. Unfortunately lost both her sons in a tragic house fire, of which she was badly burned. She tried desperately to get them out, all right? And survived, and they perished. Well, you can imagine the grief of that, and guilt, right? You're always going to feel responsible, even though it was not her fault. So what happened is, years later, she saw her son playing basketball in a dream. And she followed him, ran after him, and he turned around. And of course, as usual, you guys have noticed this, they're not like upset. They don't go, oh, I haven't seen you in a while, because they're with us all the time. They see us all the time, right? And they're not experiencing the negative emotions that we do. They don't experience the attachment that we do. We're sad because we're attached to that person, and we want them there for us. We're not crying for them, because they're off in like amazing place. They're back to where they're home. They're back to where they're supposed to be. And he said, Mom, you gotta let me go. You gotta let me go. And she realized that he saw her suffering. And he finally came to visit her and said, look, I'm here, I'm happy. I'm playing basketball. He was having a blast. He was not worried about her. He was like, it started like, okay, you're off there. And then everybody else is in another room on the play, and you're off the stage, and you're off having a great time, and you're just waiting for the play to end so that they can get off the stage and join you. That's all it is, and they know that. They don't take it seriously. They don't go, oh, they're over there, oh, and I missed them. Those are human emotions. So I want you to know that animal, so happy, running around like a little crazy. So my little skeezy boo, that's my little Jack Russell, who was like insane. Like, you know, if you didn't like have a super high energy level, this is not the dog for you, right? And so Skeezy Boo, when he died in my arms. He took his last breath with me. It was amazing. Skeezy Boo came back, and he showed up, and I went, oh, Skeezy Boo, and I was carrying him, and he jumped down. I was like, ah, because when he died, he was so old and feeble. Like, the last thing you would do is drop the dog. And he hit the ground and ran off like a crazy man, like he is. And because he wasn't sick anymore and old, and I realized, oh my gosh, that's right, you're like a puppy again. And he's running around like a crazy dog, you know, and every once in a while he shows up and he's running around like a nut. So I want you to know that they're out of the pain, they're out of the suffering, and that they're not experiencing that sadness or loss that we do. They're having a blast, and they're just going, and there's no such thing as time. So for them, it's not like, oh my gosh, I gotta wait, you know, 50 years for my human to die, you know, to come visit me. No, they're with you all the time, and sometimes you'll experience that. I would experience, this is weird, because my kitty boo, you know, Coo Kitty, as you guys know, I had a stray show up. I am actually allergic to cats, highly allergic to cats. I ended up taking this cat in. God knows the stuff I went through because he was not trained. And so he was trained to go outside. He did not want to stay inside all the time. That was part of the issue later on because he got killed by a coyote. But he rarely went out, and I kept him inside. But he wanted to go outside to go potty, all right? So I would let him go out. And so Boo Kitty was trained. He did not pee-pee and do stuff in the house, right? In the beginning, we had a couple incidents, but that was not a problem, right? So later on, after he died, I would periodically smell cat pee, really strong. Well, I never had that in the house because he never peed in the house. We never had those situations. So I realized that that was how he was getting my attention to let me know. And I would actually see like little shadows on the ground. And you guys might have experienced this. So with animals, it's pretty amazing. All right, so, you know, if you see them on the other side in the dream, that is real. That's the only way they can come visit us without freaking us out. Because if, you know, if your dog showed up in the house, you'd probably go, ah! Ghost dog, you know, right? Because we have fears built in. We're told that that's nasty stuff. So I'm going to give you a few examples of my relatives. So my grandma and I had a great relationship. I was actually the last person to be with her just before she died, and I knew she was going to die that night. You know, there's a difference when they look really sick and then when they're like, whoa. So sure enough, that night, I told my mom, I said, she's not going to make it. I mean, it's like she's going to go. And I woke up at like, let's say, I think it was like 11:16 or something like that, or 11:08, I think it was. Exactly 11:08. I woke up and I looked right at the clock. It was 11:08. And I got up and I went outside on my deck, on my backyard. It was a beautiful night. And I just sat there. And I thought of her. And the phone rang shortly thereafter. And it was my mom. I said, Grandma went. She said, yeah. I said, I woke up at 11:06. And my mom said, I woke up at 11:06. And she had just died. Chances are pretty good. Grandma died at 11:06. But my mother and I both woke up at the exact bizarre time and noted it. And we're both up, which is unusual. So these are real things. We are soul groups. We are tied to each other. So my grandma, like this is many, many years ago, and I was living up in Michigan, hard winters, and you know, struggling with my career and just very lost at the time. And so I asked my grandma for a sign. By the way, snow on the ground. It was the dead of winter, a couple feet of snow. This will fit in with the dog story. The subscriber who had the locket, you're going to really relate to this. Well, I had planted, my grandma had the most amazing rose garden, so I planted a rose bush in honor of her in my own backyard. And of course, it's the dead of winter, Michigan, the ground is frozen, so nothing's gonna bloom. And I said, Grandma, just give me a sign that you're with me. The next day, there was one red rose bloomed in snow, I went, oh my gosh, what is that? So I told my mom, and she says, well, you asked for a sign and it's Grandma's bush and a rose in the dead of winter. She goes, how is that possible? She says, it was Grandma. So of course, being skeptical at the time, you know, right, we do this. How amazing is that? And I'm asking for another sign. Grandma, okay, I know this is silly, but just, could you give me another sign just so I know it really was you? Hello, a rose in the dead of winter on her bush. That wasn't like enough for you? The next day there was a second rose that bloomed. And that was it, it stopped. All right, come on. All right, so the other thing too is, it was the same year, I was just really lost. And I asked for my grandma for a sign. I just said, Grandma, I just need to know that you're there, you're supporting me and whatever. And I'm in my office, I had a home office, and I was on my computer. And I looked down in the middle of the floor, not anywhere near paperwork or anything. In the middle of the floor is an envelope. I'm not making this stuff up, by the way. You guys know this, right? In the middle of the floor is an envelope. It's from my grandmother. And I'm like, what? My grandma had been gone for like, you know, almost a year. I open it up. It is a Christmas card with money in it. Apparently it was from a Christmas prior to her dying that I never opened or at least used the money. I have no clue where I had put it. I didn't know I even had it. And I don't have any idea how that envelope could get in the middle of the floor. It wasn't like, oh, it fell off somewhere, it was stuck, or it was in a pile of... It's in the middle of the floor that I was walking around and stuff with, didn't have paperwork with me. Okay, you can't make this stuff up. All right, so now we're going to go into some stories with my dad. This one was mind-blowing. If you haven't heard this, if you don't know, I was a former investment banker for 25 years, and I quit my job, all right? I quit. I owned the company. It was killing me. I was unhappy. I was constantly struggling. Clients weren't paying their bills. We had to go to court twice. You know, that it's just really just brutal. People just, when it comes to large amounts of money, you know, people get really weird. So they always say, pay attention to your body. If there are certain things like your feet, your knees, your hips hurt, you may be not going in the right direction, right? You're not going the right direction, so your body is reflecting that. You know, your back, your spine is taking on responsibilities. The core of your life, the foundation is not right. Maybe you're not spiritually in alignment, taking on too much, stress, shoulders, you know, all these other things, you know, your skin, your stomach. I know there's some great books out there. Some people suggested some. I guess Louise Hayes has some books about, you know, what those mean. I know that cancer is can very much be connected to anger, keeping anger in. You could have the most easygoing person and they're just holding in a lot of anger and frustration, right? And it internalizes in the body. Well, mine was extreme pain in my left foot. I didn't know what it was, and I realized that it wasn't going away. Well, I'm a runner, so I was running several miles a day on this foot that was absolutely agonizing. And it got to the point where then it was swelling up, and I'd go run on it anyways, which was not smart, but I wasn't going to let it stop me because I pushed through pain. And every morning I got up and I put my foot on the floor, and this searing pain would shoot through my foot. And it was mostly in the big toe and the joint there, so I knew there was something seriously wrong there. So finally, I said, that's it, I give up, you know, and I quit my job, all right? I quit my career, didn't have any real plan in place, said, I give up. And then I finally said, and by the way, I'll just have to go get surgery. I'm going to have to accept that I have to get surgery and quit screwing around with this. It's not going away. It's obviously a serious problem, whatever it is. And so I was at peace with that, getting the surgery, and I was at peace with the fact that I had no plan. I was on the no plan, and that I was just going to go and, you know, figure it out, because I know I'm always taken care of. I know this, right? That night, I'm asleep, and I feel something moving my foot, my big toe. I feel my big toe. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't independently move my big toe. Everything like moves together. Something was moving my toe, and I felt and heard really loud pop. It didn't hurt, but it was this pop. And I was still half asleep, and I was waking up, and then somebody took my big toe and was doing this. And I remember thinking, who is moving my big toe? But I was in such a deep sleep, but I was not asleep. I was in that theta state where you're trying to wake up. And I remember thinking, what was that? And why is my toe moving? I can't even do that. I wake up the next morning remembering that, going, what was that? I put my foot on the floor. Zero pain. And I have had zero pain since that day. No pain, nothing. My foot is amazing. There is nothing wrong with my foot now. Spontaneous healing. All right? Stuff going on the other side. Why? I made a decision here. All right? So I caused that spontaneous healing because I opened the gateway to say, okay, that's where I'm going to go. That's the space I'm going to go into. So you'll get the help when you're ready for it. All right, so I'll give you some. So I'll tell you about my dad. My dad did some mind-blowing stuff, and by the way, I wasn't the only one that experienced some of these things. All right, so my dad died in the hospital on all these machines, and I knew that he was probably outside of his body, and I treated him that way, and I talked to him that way. So I knew that my dad was struggling. He had a lot of back pain, hip pain, all kinds of stuff, and he was taking a lot of painkillers. I wish he'd have been doing the pot derivative for painkillers. You don't get high, but you know, it helps. That probably would have saved his life. But he's taking these painkillers that weren't working very well, and had surgery and all kinds of stuff. He was suffering terribly, and it drilled a hole in his stomach, and he was bleeding internally, didn't even know it. So he lost so much blood that he went into cardiac arrest, because the guy was in amazing health. There was nothing wrong with him. The doctor brought him back 9 times in emergency. She said, the only reason I jolted your dad again, she says, after the 8th time, she realized that, and he was 80 years old, she said, there's no reason to bring this guy back. He's going to have so much damage. It's ridiculous. So she stopped, and my dad squeezed her finger, so she jolted him one more time, and he came back. So he was over there talking, making some decisions. Well, my brother tells me, I'm down in Georgia, and I have to drive up there because I can't get a flight out quick enough. It was actually better for me to drive up. It was going to take me, you know, what, 12 or 15 hours or something like that. So I drive up. During the night that I drive up, which was the next day, right, they started to lose him. And he came back. I think my dad hung in there for me because I didn't come home for my mom. Because my dad told me she was going to be moved out of the hospital and into a care facility, and she was going to be okay. She had had a stroke, but she died. And I always thought, I should have just gone up there. I should have just gone up. And I didn't want to miss that again, you know, no matter what the situation was. I think my dad hung in there for me. So my brother and I had to take him off of life support. There was no way he was coming back, all right? Well, we went to the house after we took him off of life support. My niece and nephew were with me. My brother and I were there. And the house was a total disaster. We had to deal with some really, really crazy stuff. So the next day we got right at it, cleaning everything, getting everything done, because there was no sitting around, you know, crying and having a cocktail. This place had to be handled. So my niece and nephew, my nephew and his wife, and I are down in the basement, which is actually a full-blown living room and everything, that was just a mess. And so we're going through all this stuff saying, you know, how does anybody accumulate all this stuff and things in boxes that had never been used, and it was, you know, basically a hoarding situation. You know, accumulating stuff, be careful of that, people, you know, that you get attached, you're attached to that. And so we were working, and there's a sconce on the wall that had been burnt out forever, for as long as I can remember. And we started talking about my dad and, you know, how does this happen? And all of a sudden the sconce on the wall started flashing like this. Bump, 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 bump. And all of us just stopped and stared at it because it was weird. And I said, oh boy, I thought that was burnt out. And it's flashing. Just, I mean, it's not like a light bulb wasn't, you know, turned or something. It was like, it had been out. So I said, maybe it's mom. I don't know why I said my mom. I said, maybe it's my mom trying to talk to us. And of course my nephew says, no. I said, oh, he's a very practical person. I said, oh, you don't believe in that stuff? I said, okay, let's ask questions. So this thing is flashing. And I said, Mom, if it's you, flash once. It shuts off. It stops flashing altogether. And we went, okay, that was weird that it did it on command. I said, oh, it's not my mom. I said, maybe it's Dad. And so we're assuming that it burnt out at this point. I said, Dad, if it's you, flash once. Boom. Of course, my niece and nephew freaked out. We ran up the stairs. And then I said, oh, you don't believe it? And I asked another question. I said, Dad? Because then my nephew said, he's probably upset because we're throwing all of his stuff away. And I said, well, I'll ask him. I said, Dad, if you're okay with what we're doing, flash once. Boom. Now, let's run the odds on that one. And by the way, it stopped. Then it shut off. And I didn't ask any more questions after that. What are the chances of it answering me twice with one flash and shutting off after it was doing this? All right, so my dad went into a coma at 3 p.m. On, I believe it was a Thursday. So my brother said to me, like a couple days later, well, I was going to go pick up my dad's ashes a few days later. And my brother said, well, this is about the time that Dad died. And, you know, I said, really? And he goes, yeah, that's when his heart actually stopped, was 3 p.m., even though, you know, he had collapsed earlier. He said 3 p.m. is when actually, I believe, he was gone. He said that's when he was, in my viewpoint, dead. That's when he went on those life support. 3 p.m. My brother made a point of telling me this. I said, wow. So I went and picked up his ashes, and I came back, and my brother said, the grandfather clock was chiming. And my brother said, come here. And I said, what? And he goes, listen to this. I said, yeah, the clock's chiming. He goes, no, look at the time. Well, it was like 5 o'clock. Well, the clock said 3 o'clock. And it was chiming, and it didn't stop. It wouldn't stop chiming. I said, oh my God. And he said, well, here's the interesting thing. He said, you told me that Dad can hear me and to talk to him. He said, so I did. And a couple minutes, he said, well, Dad, it was this time last week that we lost you, and right? And then the clock started chiming, it didn't stop at 3 o'clock. I was in my dad's office cleaning things out, talking to him, and an alarm clock went off. And I said, oh no. no, this can't be. And I looked at my watch and I said, or my cell phone, I think it was, because I don't wear a watch. And I thought, okay, it's 4 o'clock. I just like, okay, it's not 3 o'clock, it's 4 o'clock. And then I'm like, how did the alarm go off? I've been working in this office for a week, cleaning stuff up. And I finally went through all this paperwork. I find this little alarm clock. Guess what the time on the alarm clock was? 3 o'clock. Yeah. How that alarm got set and went off while I was talking to my dad, and I'd been in there every day for a week. Why did that alarm clock go off? All right, so another thing, by the way, I've got so many of these, I could be on here for a couple hours. My dad actually did speak on a cell phone to me. I know this is a little crazy, but I did hear him say something. I won't go into detail, but I felt that he was trapped. I did do a meditation that night and talked to him and told him there was nothing but light and love. I think he was very distraught because he left us with a mess and he was hanging around. I wanted to assure him we're going to be okay and that it's all right to pass on, because my dad, you know, who knows what kind of ideas he had about the other side. All right, I'll give you a few more. My dad had all kinds of, he was a coin collector, and he had told us where everything was in the house, and one of them was his workshop, and I ripped the workshop apart and couldn't find his coins. So I said, that's it. I've looked everywhere, every nook and cranny. So I had a dream a couple nights later. My dad appeared to me, and it was so real, it scared the crap out of me. And then I went, okay, it's dad. And he took a whole jar of coins, and he was standing in front of his workshop, and he poured them on the floor. They were in jars, and he poured them on the floor. He didn't say anything. And I said, Dad, is it okay if I hug you? And he said, yes. And I hugged him. And he just seemed very neutral. You know, I think he acted like he was in shock. Yes, you are gone now. You know, I want to hug you. He didn't seem really excited about that because, again, they're in transition. He was in transition. And I did have a conversation with him, which I won't share with you, but you can get information from them. But just remember, they're not enlightened just because they're dead. All right, so I told my brother about the dream. I said, there are coins in the workshop, and I haven't found them. He goes, you looked everywhere. So I went back in the workshop, crawled up into this little space behind the heater that was way back there. Sure enough, there are jars of coins. All right, I asked my dad when I went back to Georgia, I had to open up his estate account. I had to go to the bank. I was handling a lot of stuff, a lot. I was the executor of the estate. Before I went to the bank, before I left the house, I said, Dad, please give me a sign. But I was very specific. I said, I want to hear my nickname. My dad used to call me Missy. And I said, I want to hear my nickname or see it somewhere. That's pretty specific. I don't know about you. When have you ever heard Missy, right? If you did, it was very random, or you might know somebody with that name or something. Missy, I don't hear that ever. There would be no reason for me to see or hear that. So that was pretty specific. I said, I want to hear it. I go to the bank and I'm there for 2 hours and we're trying to just get everything in order. Now, there was a very professional black man, young guy, he's in his 30s. He was a manager. He just treated me so professionally and nice. He was wonderful. And he was there just really doing everything in his power to help me. Super professional guy. I'm saying that on purpose. And the reason I mentioned that he's black and in his 30s is because of what he did at this point. Just before I left, he put his hand on the desk, leaned over and said, "You've got your hands full, Missy." Now, somebody my age, a white person might say something like that, right? That is not something that a professional young man, black, even if he was white, manager, would say. Especially to somebody who's considerably older than him. And I was like, oh my God. And I thought it was the sweetest thing that he said that. I thought that was so cool. But I thought, he probably, when I left, thought, why did I say that? That was weird. Missy? Here's this woman, this, bank client, I'm calling her Missy? Yeah, so, all right, so there's another one I'm going to share with you, with my dad. And by the way, they go on and on and on and on. He just does some crazy stuff. And so again, witnessed by other people. These things are witnessed by other people. All right, so I went back to the bank later on, and I wanted to get a loan because I was going to launch a small business. This is when I was decided to get my internet training. And I decided to do an e-commerce store, which is why I needed to get the internet training. I wasn't very good at it, but I was going to start this. I was going to launch it, and I needed to get inventory. So I went to the bank to get a loan, and because I didn't have everything set up or everything, the bank said, you know, yeah, we'll call in. It's a different division. They called in, and we got this guy on the phone who, you know, the approval process, he says it takes a week to get approved, but he says, I'm going to tell you right now, I just ran it. And he goes, you're not going to get approved. He said, here's some things you need to set up first to establish the company credit and, you know, all the things you need to get in order to get that loan. Simple stuff. I'm an investment banker. I know this stuff. But I thought, I can ask, right? You never know. And then he says, no. He said, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't qualify. He said, a couple months, come back and we'll get it set up because it's not going to take much for you to do this. Okay, cool. He says, so he's on his computer. We have him on the speakerphone. I'm in one location. He's in another. And he goes, you know what, I'm just going to, he put the information in. I put the information in. It showed up on his computer, and he had it sitting there. And he said, so just so you know, he said, if I submit this, it takes at least a week for us to approve it anyways. So I couldn't even give you an answer today. But he says, it's not going to go through anyways. While he's talking to us, he says on a speakerphone, oh my God, oh my God, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And he keeps doing that. And the bank agent says, what? What? He goes, I don't know what just happened. He says, I can't explain this. He said, my screen just lit up bright blue, like it, you know, something's wrong with it. He said, this whole room just lit up bright blue. He said, I'm looking at the screen. You just got approved. I said, you just said that's impossible. You said I don't even qualify. He goes, no. He says, you don't. And he goes, and it takes a week. He says, you just got approved. He says, I don't know what just happened. He said, this was the most bizarre experience I've ever had. He said, this room lit up, that computer lit up bright blue. He said, it was like a flash in the room. He was going on and on about this thing. And by the way, he didn't know my dad died. I said, I think I know who did that. I got approved. I got my loan, started my business. All right, so that's a lot of stuff. Now, those are a lot of stories. That's a fraction of the stuff I've experienced. Now, how many of you would take some of those, except for like the flashing light and the, you know, well, actually most of it, right? Missy, all that. Those are so blatant. But then there's some other things that aren't so blatant, and you dismiss them. Dismiss nothing. Angelic signs are always with you. You can ask for them. You can be specific. Don't dictate certain things. Don't say it has to be here and this is how you do it. You just say, send me the sign or whatever, and I just need to know you're there. Especially if you're talking to a loved one. They'll do everything in their power. They might put a coin somewhere. Something will show up that you go, how did this get here? Or you'll read something and it'll be like, oh my gosh, my grandma would say that, or whatever. And like with my friend with the dog, the strawberry bush that bloomed, right? It was like same thing. And your dog loved strawberries, loved the bushes and stuff. Take note, a lot of you had the flowers that bloom in crazy times. Butterflies. Okay, I had my grandma butterflies. I used to have dragonflies that would show up and just on me. We'd be out in the middle of the city and a dragonfly would be like circling my car and hanging out with me. I had dragonflies for quite a while. So amazing things can happen to you if you're open to them. Ask for them. Don't be afraid, and know that they're with you and that you can ask for certain things. But if you're asking for signs of what to do, I'll give you an example. Here's my final one. I lived in an amazing home that I loved, and I had to make a decision. Am I going to stay there and do some major renovations, or is it time to let it go and let somebody else deal with that, which was going to be a lot of work, pull me away from what I do here? And I decided to let it go and move. But the reason why I ultimately knew I had to do that is I asked for signs. Within 2 days, The dishwasher went out, the refrigerator went out, the basement flooded, the water heater went out. What else happened? The roof started to leak. I said, okay, oh, I get it. And then I was in the basement, because it flooded, I took my shoes off instead of getting my rubber boots and putting them on, and then got a piece of glass in my foot. If you guys heard me tell the story, when I moved, that glass stayed in the whole time until the day everything got in this house. I got the shard of glass out, because ER couldn't even get it out. And I took tweezers and I opened that baby up and I pulled it out. All of a sudden that shard came out that day when I was finally in where I was supposed to be. So I'm going to tell you something. These signs, then you can dismiss it and go, well, you know, it was an old house. Things were going all of a sudden. No, those were all my signs. I asked for them and I got them. All right. When I was looking for my new home, I found 3. I said yes on the first one, and they said, oh, within an hour, somebody else put an offering. Somebody else took it. Okay. I saw the second one. I got a hold of the guy, tried to get a hold of the guy and said, yes, I'm going to take it. He says he never got the message. The next day, this one becomes available. I said, I'm going to be there. I show up. I'm the first person to see it. I write a check. And then guess what happened? The other 2 homes fell through. Both of them called me and said, I would love for you to take this home. It's for you. I said, I just took another place. Right? I wasn't supposed to be in those 2. So you can say,